Welcome back to PJGH Education. My name is Stephen, and today we're continuing our series on the Acts of the Apostles. This is Acts chapter 24, verses 1 to 27, episode number 40, called Corruption. Now, in the previous episode, we have Paul being brought from Jerusalem to Caesarea because there was a plot on his life, and there was collusion with the Sanhedrin, and so Paul's life was in danger. He was brought by Claudius Lysias, the Roman tribune, to Caesarea to be placed under the custody of Felix, the governor at Caesarea. And so we pick up the story from there. And after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and a spokesman, one Tertullus, that's basically a lawyer. They're laid before the governor, that's Felix, their case against Paul. And when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, "Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude." So before he lay out his case against Paul, it's time for some captatio benevolentiae. This is basically a customary winning of goodwill rhetoric, most famously used by Cicero. But you can see that there's a lot of, reforms are being made for this nation in every way, everywhere. We accept this with all gratitude. This is most probably inaccurate, or rather outright bold-faced lie, if Josephus, the Jewish historian, and Tacitus, Roman historian, both would write that Felix was a terrible, terrible governor. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. So let's get to the accusation. "For we have found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, but we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him." And the Jews also joined in the charge, affirming that all these things were so. So the accusation against Paul was that Paul stirred up riots among the Jews throughout the Roman Empire. That's a punishable offense, but that's not within Felix's jurisdiction. I mean, if he caused riot in other parts of the Roman Empire, then it's up to the governor or the proconsul or the Roman authority in those jurisdictions to figure it out. But here, this is not under Felix's jurisdiction. So the next charge against Paul was that Paul was a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarene, but that is not an offense. There is no Roman law against being part of the sect of the Nazarene, which is basically a sect of Judaism up to this point, who believed that Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, and he died and rose from the dead, and Rome has got nothing to do with something like this. So the third charge, which is more serious, is that he even tried to profane the temple. But did he? He didn't, because you seized him before he could profane the temple, didn't you? So Paul attempted to desecrate the temple. This is a punishable offense, and let's see whether this particular charge would stick. By examining him yourself, you'll be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him. So this is the case that was leveled against Paul by the Sanhedrin. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied. So this is Paul's defense. "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense." Now this is Paul's captatio benevolentiae, but much more subdued. Telling the truth is that you have been a judge for many years, and he's cheerfully making his defense, not saying anything about the virtue of Felix, for he had none. So you can see that Paul was being very genuine, whereas Tertullus, the representative of the Sanhedrin, was being rather deceitful, isn't it? You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. And so this is a very recent event. The case is very, very new. So it's easy to gather up evidence about this matter. It's not something that happened 20 years ago, whereby you couldn't find any leads, but this is something that happened 12 days ago, fresh in everyone's memory. There are many witnesses. You can go and look for them. And they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or in the city. So basically, Paul's accusers were making false allegations without evidence. This is what he's talking about. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. So these were false allegations. You can check it out. But what does Paul confess to? He says, I confess to you that according to the way, which they call a sect, they call it the Nazarene sect, we call it the way. I worship the God of our fathers. I worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, according to the way that was shown to us by Jesus of Nazareth, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets. We are not starting a new religion. We are talking about the Torah. We are talking about the prophets. So we are talking about Judaism, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. Paul asserted that the way was a legitimate expression of Judaism. What is the way about? It is about worshiping the God of Israel. What is the way about? It is about believing the Torah and the prophets, about hoping in God. And what is that hope? The hope is the resurrection of both the just and the unjust. And these men themselves, meaning the part of the Sanhedrin at the very least, the Pharisees, they accept that there will be the resurrection of both the just and the unjust. So basically, the way teaches that there is the resurrection from the dead, something that is rather mainstream, because that was what the Pharisees themselves believed. Of course, there's difference. Otherwise, there would not be the way. So the difference is that the resurrection has already happened for Jesus of Nazareth. He is the Messiah, and because of his resurrection, he guarantees that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust in the last day. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. If I have a clear conscience toward both God and man, then I'm part of the just and not the unjust. And that's basically what that part is about. So the way was a legitimate expression of Judaism. And last I know, Judaism was not outlawed by the Roman Empire. Now, after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation and to present offerings. He says, I'm a pious Jew. I've just returned from abroad to bring alms to my nation, he said. Now, this is the only time in the Acts of the Apostles where Paul bringing money back from Gentile churches to the church in Jerusalem to be presented to the church in Jerusalem is mentioned. Nowhere else is it mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles. Now, of course, we know that this is true. This is the case because we read about it in 1 Corinthians, in 2 Corinthians, and also in Romans, that Paul was bringing money from the Gentile churches that he established, and hopefully that the church in Jerusalem would receive the money. And by receiving the money, they are saying that we recognize these Gentile Christians as our brothers and sisters in the Messiah. Now, James, the brother of Jesus, the leader of the church in Jerusalem, he couldn't accept the money outright, because there were accusations that Paul had betrayed the Jewish nation. He has been asking Jews not to circumcise their children or to obey the traditions of Moses. But Paul actually did not do that. So James says, maybe you can bring these brothers to the temple and offer sacrifices, and then everyone would know that there is no truth in that, that you are still an obedient son of Israel. You are still loyal to the Jewish nation. So Paul did that. But unfortunately, before Paul could complete, there were these men from Asia, Jews from Asia, who thought that he brought in Trophimus, brought in a Gentile into the temple. And so there was this, and the rest is history. Right? That is what brought us to this point. And so, because James did not receive the money then, so I think this is the reason why Acts doesn't make much of a big deal out of it, because it wasn't a successful mission in that sense. But, well, there is a reason why this is presented in this way in Acts chapter 24, to say that Paul was a pious Jew and he is bringing money from overseas to give to the poor of his nation, of his people. So he loved the Jewish people. And furthermore, while I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. They say that I was trying to desecrate the temple, but hey, I was in a state of ritual purity at the time of my arrest. So how can I be desecrating the temple when I have just purified myself? But some Jews from Asia, they ought to be here before you to make an accusation, should they have anything against me. The real accusers, the Jews from Asia, seem to have abandoned the case, right? So they were the ones who say that I brought in a Gentile into the temple, desecrating the temple. Where are they? They are supposed to be the witnesses. So, well, they are not here. But who are here? These members of the Sanhedrin. Did they witness what the Jews from Asia claimed to have witnessed? No, they did not. So what kind of case are they bringing up against me? Or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found when I stood before the council, that is the Sanhedrin. Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial before you this day. So what then was the Sanhedrin's case? The Sanhedrin's case cannot be that I brought the Gentile into the temple. They didn't see that. They were not witnesses to that. The Jews from Asia were the ones who made that accusation, and they are not here. And so what is the Sanhedrin's case against me? Was it because I say that the resurrection of the dead? Was this the case? A Jewish theological debate about the resurrection of the dead? This is an in-house theological debate within Judaism. What has this got to do with Roman justice? Does Felix really want to get involved in a theological debate of Judaism, or what has this got to do with the Roman peace? So this is a great defense that Paul put up. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody, but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending his needs. But there is court corruption, isn't it? Felix deferred his judgment for what? To wait for Claudius Lysias? Well, you already have an accurate knowledge of the way. Why do you have to put it off? You know what this whole thing is about. You have a letter from Claudius Lysias, and you do not think that Paul was guilty. He's a Roman citizen after all, and he's not guilty. So he's being kept in custody with some liberty. That shows that Felix didn't think that Paul was a dangerous person. But why was he kept in custody? After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. And this is what the Lord prophesied to Paul, promised Paul, that you will preach the gospel, you will testify to me, you'll be my witness to kings and governors and rulers. And we are beginning to see the fulfillment of that. And Paul, he may be in chains Now, you and I, maybe when if this happened to us, we'll be asking, why me? Why this is happening to me? We may sulk and complain. But Paul, he reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment. And Felix was alarmed and said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you." So Paul preached the gospel to Felix. So why was Paul in prison? At the same time, Felix hoped that money would be given him by Paul. Now, why would Felix think that Paul had money? Well, Paul himself said, "I brought money from abroad." I suppose this is the reason why over here Luke decided to talk about this topic, because he's trying to say that Felix was corrupt. The reason why Paul was in prison for 2 years, because you see he appealed to he's going to appeal to Caesar. We're going to see that in the next episode. And so when he's before Caesar, Caesar's going to ask, "Why were you in jail for so long? Surely you have done something wrong." And the answer to that was that Felix was hoping for a bribe. Now, the only reason why I said this again, that Felix would think so, is because Paul must have with him substantial amount of money, isn't it? Substantial enough that a governor would feel that this is money worth taking. If it's just $50, then maybe Felix would not be so tempted. But it must have been a substantial amount of money, which showed that James, the brother of Jesus, could not receive the money. And so that is rather unfortunate that this eventually resulted in a rupture between Jewish believers in Jesus and the Gentile believers in Jesus. Well, so regardless, so he sent for him often and conversed with him. At the same time, you loathe him because he talks about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment. But at the same time, there's something that is really attractive about Paul that Felix wants to. So at the same time, he's attracted to what Paul has got to say. At the same time, he's repelled by Paul's message, and that is what was going on. When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. This is total corruption. It is all about money. It is all about politics. It is all about horse trading, and Paul is just a victim in such a circumstance. So that is the kind of situation that we can find ourselves in sometimes. Christians throughout the centuries, victimized by the powers that be, not necessarily because they have something against Christianity, but it's just that maybe money is involved, political favors are involved, and so because of that, Christians are left to suffer. But Christ, his plans, the plan that his testimony will be spread from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria and to the ends of the earth, that will never be thwarted. You may have thought that, wow, what a waste. 2 years. Paul in prison for 2 years. I mean, imagine if Paul were outside, isn't it? He would be founding churches. He would be discipling people. The church would be strong. What is the Lord doing? Why did he allow Paul to be in prison for 2 years, wasting 2 years of his life? Well, the Lord has his reasons. The Lord is in control. Those 2 years were never wasted. The Lord knows what he is doing. Sometimes when we are victimized this way and we wonder and we say, "Lord, isn't it better if something different happened? Wouldn't it be better for your testimony if something else happened? Wouldn't I be more effective for your work? Wouldn't I be more effective for your kingdom if such and such a thing happened to me instead of what is going on in my life? Why, Lord? It seems what a waste of time." Why don't you move now? Why 2 years in prison? And in those moments, we just need to know that we do not know everything. We cannot see everything. The Lord has His plans, and His plans uh, unfolds, and one day we will know. But as for now, in our situation, we continue to trust in Him as Paul trusted in Him. And whenever there is an opportunity to arise to talk to even be talking to your captor, Felix, to talk about righteousness, self-control, coming judgment, about the gospel of Jesus Christ, well, we seize every opportunity in season or out of season to do so. So this is the end of this episode. I will see you in the next one. God bless you.